you know, it was an interesting day. I'm sure many of you saw the news about Speaker Pelosi's husband being attacked, and it turned out that the fellow who did that's from Berkeley, which is always interesting, thinking that you live in the place where there's just really sane spiritual people. Um, but I've been transcribing this conversation I had with Ajahn Pasano last week. It goes on for a couple of hours, and it's very slow to transcribe it. I don't have really a good tech setup to do it, which is okay because it means I kind of keep backing up and going back and hearing things over. So I've been doing, it's taken me several days of working on it and hours of working on it. And it's a really wonderful thing to be immersed in, this very deep Dharma conversation with this monk who's been a monk for almost 50 years, wonderful person. And, so I felt really immersed in Dharma, and then went upstairs and for lunch and thought, well, I'll see what the news is saying now, and kind of watching, TV while I'm eating and not the healthiest thing. And just, finding my mind going off about, you guys know sort of my concerns and from being with me, and just like, oh, what's going to happen in this, how do we get out of this, place that our country seems to be heading, and then just, because I'm like, sitting with this Buddhist monk who lives a life which was described by and laid out as a form 2,500 years ago, and realizing that's like my refuge. And I've talked about this before, that and just being struck how people, each generation of people, there are people who see the meaning and purpose of their lives to accumulate power, or to control things, or to, have political outcomes, or the accumulation of vast wealth, and all these things that are so antithetical to the teachings of the Dharma. And seeing, and the thing that kind of struck me was, just an old truth, which is how transient those things are, and that what has survived is the Dharma. What that all these political leaders and kings and dictators, they're all gone. And their followers are all gone, and their beliefs are all gone, and nobody is like carrying on like, oh, well, let's, how did Cromwell lay things out? I want to really keep that tradition alive, the Cromwellian tradition or something. It's like, no, that's not what stays alive. What stays alive is spiritual teachings. And, and I was sort of explaining this to my wife after she came home, and she said, yeah, and that's how I feel about literature too, because that's her Dharma, really. She's immersed in literature and loves literature and studies and teaches literature. And that struck me as a really lovely thing too, that, that it is like these really the deeper human impulses of love and compassion and art and creativity, and that get carried on, and that the hateful and accumulative and power, violent aspects, don't survive as sort of threads. And yet, humans are, obviously, we're still, driven by it. And as I say, every generation is driven by it and has its wars and its dictators. So here we are, we have the Dharma, and we are, as a group, uh, very fortunate that we have that, that it's, and And of course, recovery is another thing that we have like that. That's transcends these worldly concerns. That is about healing, is about love and self-care and care of others. So, it's really important for me to hold on to these things, especially at another one of these moments we're in, where, there may be some real political insanity coming shortly. Not that there isn't always, but, some special, extra special with, double cheeseburgers with uh, bacon and fried onions and you know just all the trimmings. We could be looking forward to that. So bless us all, and Tiny Tim as well. So so I am grateful that to have the Dharma. And speaking of which, before we start to meditate, I'll mention that if you're in the Bay Area, um, this Sunday is the Katina Festival at Abayagiri. And so if you can get up there for that, it's really a delightful day. And they are having, Ajahn Viradamo is visiting, and he's somebody I wasn't not aware of at all. And when I was there last week, I picked up his book called The Contemplative's Craft. And I just read, I'm going to read some of it to you tonight. I just read the first chapter. It's really wonderful. He's a Canadian in the Thai forest tradition and an elder. But this is a wonderful book, and I'm sure you can find it online. I'm sure at one of the monasteries. He's at a monastery, I believe it's in Canada, called Tisarana, Tisarana, Tisarana Buddhist Monastery. So you can usually just look at their websites, and there's usually an e-version of those things. Anyway, let us sit and get into our bodies, out of our heads, into our breath, out of the madness, into the sanity. Come to believe that our breath can restore us to sanity. So just settling back into your meditation posture, whatever really supports that. Perhaps upright, certainly traditional posture, but if you need to be lying down, that's also a traditional mindfulness posture. You can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. Just turning the attention first to the feeling of your body sitting. It's almost such a simple instruction that it may sound like it's not specific enough. But see if you can sort of have this feeling of your whole body, awareness of your whole body, not so much focusing on a particular sensation or place in the body. Can you just feel your whole body? And then feeling your breath in your body. And using the breath to relax and settle the body. And there you are. There's your practice. Of course, our minds are usually not satisfied with this simple experience of awareness. So thoughts intrude, thoughts, thoughts capture our attention, take us away from awareness of the body and the breath. And so when we notice that the thoughts have stepped in and captured our attention, we can acknowledge that and gently come back to the breath. So this is the critical moment in practice. It's easy for thoughts to stimulate more thoughts, or thinking about thoughts, complaining about thoughts, judging ourselves for having thoughts. So our effort in that moment is simply to come back to the felt experience in the body. And in that moment, if there's been some emotional content or trigger in the thinking, we may notice an unpleasant sensation in the body. Then again, our effort is challenged to not fall into resistance or judgment of the unpleasant, or problem solving how to get rid of the unpleasant, but simply to breathe with the unpleasant. Now, it's also true that there can be pleasant thoughts that trigger pleasant feelings. And that as we are trying to train the attention to stay in the body, we try to let go of the pleasant thoughts as well. And so when we come back to the breath and to the body, there may be a pleasant feeling. What we discover is that pleasant feelings also can stimulate more thinking. So in a way, it's not so much the nature of the feeling, but rather the energy of the feeling that triggers thinking, whether it's pleasant thinking or unpleasant thinking, just more proliferation, more rumination in the mind. So we try to take care with our attention and with our effort to let go of all the manifestations of thought, which are ultimately manifestations of self creations. But we don't set this up as some ideal to be strived for. Rather, we just see that we are training ourselves to see the thoughts that arise, to not be completely enchanted by them, to not be in conflict with our mind or with any aspect of our inner life, the felt experience, or the mental proliferation, the thought making. And so acceptance lies at the root of this relationship. All right. Yeah, so a couple of things I wanted to read that really felt very in harmony, excuse me, with my own understanding. This is from Ajahn Viradharma, The Contemplative's Craft, subtitled Internalizing the Teachings of the Buddha. And this chapter is called Connection and Alienation, which in and of itself is a kind of an interesting title for, recovery community. I think that it's become a fairly common thing that people have heard this definition that the opposite of addiction is connection. So I'm not sure where it came from. Somebody here probably knows, but it's a popular saying. So yeah. So just picking up in the middle of this chapter, on meditation retreats, you sometimes have to sit through some really awful memory patterns. If you've been on a meditation retreat, this will sound familiar. You can have a day on the cushion when all these negative emotions keep coming up. Then the next day, the mind is just empty. At that point, we think, well, why can't I just do the empty bit? We don't see that the two things are linked and that the act of bearing witness to those painful emotions without getting caught up in their drama leads to their falling away. That's how our potential for wonder comes into being. He's been talking about wonder throughout the chapter. Now our intention is freed up to notice the beauty or goodness in the world, or whatever it is that fills us with a sense of awe or gratitude. That sense of wonder and connection is based on the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path factor of right effort. Right effort, which seeks to cultivate wholesome qualities and abandon unwholesome qualities, is grounded in an awareness of the way things are. As such, right effort is attentive, investigative, and focused on cause and effect. For instance, if a complaining mind state arises, we make a point of being aware of it and accept that it's there. That's the attentive part of right effort. Once we're aware of that mind state, we can then shift our focus from the narrative in the brain down to the feelings of the mind state in the body. That's the exploratory part. Finally, we notice the effect that changing our focus in this way has on the mind. If we find that this shifting of our focus helps to keep us from getting caught up in our moods and storylines, then we can regard it as skillful and choose to cultivate it. That's the part of right effort that explores cause and effect. So that paragraph itself is one of those ones that you could kind of, put on the bathroom mirror type thing, A right effort. And first of all, I want to acknowledge, for those of you who are familiar with the RAIN practice, the recognize, accept, investigate, non-identify, that a lot of that is contained in this description of what he's saying. But although obviously RAIN is just something that was evolved out of this practice of mindfulness. But it's quite noticeable here. But I want to go back and kind of go through this a little bit, because it's interesting. Like, right effort, which seeks to cultivate wholesome qualities and abandon unwholesome qualities. This is something that in my conversation with Ajahn Pasano, I hear him saying this a lot, and it just strikes me. It's so simple, and yet not cultivating wholesome qualities, abandoning unwholesome qualities, and I would say generally, at least for me, it sort of goes in the in the reverse. That is, I start with the abandoning the unwholesome kind of, but just to see like that it's not complicated in a way. Our practice, I think we tend to make it complicated, but let's just take recovery. Recovery is the abandonment of the unwholesome quality of addiction and the cultivation of the positive quality of letting go, and as well as the positive qualities of connection, of service, of honesty, self-honesty, all the things that are involved in, I could say, 12 steps or any kind of recovery program. So we're already doing it, is what I'm saying. Like, it's not like, oh, I've got to figure out how to do this. I mean, it's something we already do for any kind of spiritual path. But this is a way of really sort of defining the process, cultivating wholesome qualities, abandoning unwholesome qualities. And we can see throughout the day, like moments when unwholesome qualities arise, moments when wholesome qualities arise, or moments when we have an opportunity to let go of an unwholesome quality, or moments when we have an opportunity to cultivate, like, oh, I could do something nice right now, So these three things that he defines about right effort. As such, right effort is attentive, investigative, and focused on cause and effect. That last one, I think, is something we don't pay as much attention to. But so it's attentive, just like as with rain, like recognize. So I see what's going on. Oh, this, as he describes it, a complaining mind state arises. So we're just aware of it. And then, as he says, we accept that it's there, right? Because if we don't accept it, if we just see it and then resist it or get bothered by it, then we're going in the wrong direction, right? We're creating aversion. So we become aware of it and accept it. That's the attentive part of right effort. Once we're aware of that mind state, we can then shift our attention, our focus from the narrative in the brain, so where it's like, okay, noticing, I'm thinking, down into the body, right? The feelings of the mind state in the body, and again, most of you have been with me for a long time, and like, this is what I'm kind of constantly talking about, like what's the feeling, and as I'll call it, like the our energetic state. What's the state we're in, and not like just in the mind, not just as a thought. And now working with the felt experience in the body is what allows us to let go, to be with it as energy, to be with it as something impermanent, to be with it as something not self, that's not me, it's just a feeling. Well, that's the exploratory part. And so in rain, I think people often get confused about the I and rain investigation. So this is what it is. It's, what does this feel like? I see that there's this thought, this emotion, I'm aware of that and I'm trying to accept it, but now I need to just go into it. And so what does it feel like? And finally, we notice the effect that changing our focus in this way has on the mind. So in other words, we see how this works. I talk about this with the Four Noble Truths pretty regularly. It's like, oh, you see the suffering. You realize when you let go of the attachment or the desire in the mind that it goes away. So you're seeing cause and effect. And that becomes the motivation for doing it. Like, why are we letting go of all this stuff? Why not just hold on to things? Well, because you see how letting go is where the comfort comes. If we find that this shifting of our focus helps to keep us from getting caught up in our moods and storylines, then we can regard it as skillful and choose to cultivate it. So there's a couple things in here. One is the faith element, because, we're the challenge put forth by the Buddha to let go on so many levels. The immediate question that comes is, what's the benefit of that? And so the way we see the benefit is when we watch the process. And then we see, oh, this is how it works. This leads to this. And then doing this when that happens leads to that. And so that gets cause and effect, right? So now I have an understanding of this process, of the purpose. I'm not just doing it because, I read a book and sounds spiritual, and there's a Buddhist monk said it was good. It's, I feel how that works. And now you're motivated. Now you're engaged in the process. Now you really want to get it because you see, wow, I can actually let go and have less unhappiness in my life, less discomfort. And so now you have this template for how that works. And then throughout your day, throughout your life, you catch yourself, oh, wow, I'm really getting into this agitated state. Oh, right, I know what I can do with that. So I can let it go. So then you have you have the faith that it works, because you've got to believe or you're not going to do it, but you also then have the strategy for how to do it. And you have those tools. So it's a really important part of this process, the seeing the cause and effect. So I still got some time. I'm going to now read something else, because one of the things Ajahn Pasano was recommending was some of Thanissaro Bhikkhu's writing on the Anapanasati Sutta, on mindfulness of breathing, and there's a specific reason why I'm turning to this. It's connected to what I've been talking about. So if you're not familiar with him, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, he's also known as, he used to be called Tan Jeff. Ajahn Pasano refers to him as Ajahn Jeff. So it's sort of odd that he keeps his English name, or his birth name. Anyway, and he has a monastery near San Diego called the Metta Monastery. And if you're familiar with Access to Insight, that website, he's has a lot of material on there. He's a translator of Pali, and he translates Pali somewhat differently from some of the other typical, like Bhikkhu Bodhi and Analayo. So you get like alternative translations, which can be helpful. Or confusing. So, okay, this is what I want to read to you, because this is getting more into the detail of that part of the process that is going into the body that Veridamo talks about. When the Buddha describes, and actually I'll give you this website. I'm reading off a website, and this website has a whole bunch. I mean, just this one page has a whole bunch of different short essays. So you might have to search for the one that I'm reading. It's called The Steps of Breath Meditation. So it's about the Anapanasati Sutta. He says, when the Buddha describes concentration states, he doesn't use images of single pointedness. He uses images of whole body awareness. And I think that's a really important idea right there, because very often we're taught, like, just focus just on the sensations at the tip of your nose, stay really focused, very tight. And that's, according to Thanissaro Bhikkhu, that's not what we do. So the Buddha doesn't use images of single pointedness. He uses images of whole body awareness. When a sense of rapture and pleasure comes from the breath, he tells you to knead that sense, K-N-E-A-D, to knead that sense of rapture and pleasure through the whole body, the way you would knead water into flour to make dough. Another image is of the rapture welling up from within the body and filling the body, just like a spring of cool water coming up from within a lake, filling the entire lake with its coolness. So he gives a couple more images, which are the classic images you read about from the jhanas. But the images aren't so important. I'm going to skip ahead. He says, these are all images of whole body awareness, of a sense of rapture, pleasure, or bright awareness filling the entire body. That's what you want to work on when you get to know the breath, because the type of awareness that allows insight to arise is not restricted to one point. When you're focused on one point and blot out everything else, that leaves a lot of blind spots in the mind. But when you try to get a more all-around awareness, it helps eliminate the blind spots. In other words, you want to be immersed in the breath, aware of the breath all around you. One of the phrases they use for this, kaya gata sati, is mindfulness immersed in the body. The body is saturated with awareness, and the awareness itself gets immersed in the body, is surrounded by the body. So it's not that you're up in one spot, say in the back of the head, looking at the rest of the body from that one spot, or trying to block awareness of the rest of the body from that one spot of awareness. You've got to have a whole body awareness all around 360 degrees so as to eliminate the blind spots in the mind. And I find that very much in accord with my own practice, and actually very like inspiring to like, oh, do more of that, like being more. Oh, and you know, in my instruction tonight, I mentioned like being aware of your whole body, and I said I think that can be kind of confusing what that means, and it's a lot easier to understand. Pay attention to the sensations of your breath at your nostrils. It's like, okay, that's a very simple thing, but being aware of the whole body is much more tricky and takes more practice. But I think he's making a really important point, and I really like the way he talks about blind spots, because that's something I noticed a long time ago when I first was working on developing concentration on retreat. I noticed that I'd be like trying to get really close into my breath, and then it would be like I'd be like lost in thought for 5 minutes before I would realize that I was lost. And it was just this very thing. I really started to see it kind of like he's describing, like I was just staring at this one direction while all this other stuff was going on in my mind, and I couldn't see it because I was very myopic in my view. And so this idea of kind of, we also can talk about spacious awareness, right? What we're talking about is having this broader awareness so that there aren't sort of blind spots, as he puts it, places where the thoughts just sort of poke in. So, all of this is trying to put language onto somewhat nonverbal experiences. So a little tricky, but I think it's that really useful to sort of work with these ideas, particularly the idea of the whole body awareness. And then again, going back to Viradama's suggestion which really takes apart this process that I'm often trying to describe, like be aware first of the thought, and then go into the body and see how the thought is manifesting in the body, and then see how letting go of the thought, how that process unfolded. So, just, I mean, it's interesting, I've been practicing for a long time, and you'd think I would get like, either have like figured out exactly what I want to do, and like, this is what I do, or be bored with the whole thing. And neither of those things happens. I continue to be interested in this process. I mean, it's the mind, so like, is there anything more interesting? But and I will say, as a meditation teacher, I'm always challenged by my effort to communicate this, and one of the questions I run into, as somebody who's done a lot of practice, is, oh, like, does this make sense to somebody who hasn't done a lot of practice? I was just on Wednesday night, I was over at the University of California for visiting with their mindfulness club, which is incredibly expanded. I started visiting with them 6 years ago when it was like a half dozen people on a good night. And now there's 30 people showing up, which the leader says seems to have come out of the pandemic. But here I am with a bunch of, 19, 20-year-olds, some of whom surprisingly have some real practice experience, but most of whom are really just coming to learn about mindfulness. And it's like, what can I say to them? What's useful? Because it's an interesting question. And I know some of you here are mindfulness teachers as well. And because you kind of ask this question, I want to give them something that they can sort of get hold of right away and understand right away. And then hopefully they'll even like take home and try to work with. But if I give them something that's really just not sustainable, that's only like, okay, this is just for beginners, but once you get to know it, you forget what I'm telling you, do something else. Is that really serving them? Because I feel like in some ways that's what happened to me. Like I learned this one way of meditating that was presented to me, and I, as an introduction, but I discovered that it wasn't sustainable as a practice. I didn't feel it was really like would carry me. That at a certain point I kind of found it limiting. And I had to kind of discover this way of practicing, which is kind of what I'm describing to you now from these two readings tonight. And so, but as I say, these things these teachers are describing are subtle. They're not just pay attention to your breath, and if there's a thought, let it go and come back to your breath. It's more. There's more to it than that. So it's an ongoing question for me. What's the most skillful way to offer these instructions? And I kind of use this group as a place to play with my meditation instructions, because you guys are with me, many of you, twice a week, and I figure you don't really want to hear the same thing every time. And so one way of keeping it fresh for you and continuing to explore for myself is to kind of try different variations and sort of explore different areas, or just come up with something fresh. So I hope that all of this is helpful this evening, and love to hear from anyone who would like to chime in tonight.
Kevin, this is Anne from San Diego.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Kevin. I had a question for you. I had never heard the acronym RAIN before. So could you please tell me again what the N stood for?
So well, that's a good question. It's debatable, as some of the people know. So originally, apparently this was originally conceived by a teacher named Michelle McDonald. And originally N stood for non-identify. So after you go through the process, it's like, okay, I see all this stuff, and then but I don't see it as being self.
Okay.
However, others have come along and decided that they wanted it to be something else. And so other people use nurture, which is very different from non-identify. And I think nurturing is an important part of practice. I actually think that acceptance is nurturing. So I feel like that the nurturing is sort of built in, but there you go.
Thank you. I like the non-identify better than nurture. But thank
that
you
means
very much.
you're on my team then. So
Okay, cool.
okay, we'll get, maybe we'll have a football game between the nurtures and the non-identifies. Those will be the
Okay.
teams.
Okay. Well, the non-identifies will win. So
Well, they're going to have a really hard time because they're not identifying with their team, or anything.
oh
So
yeah, that's
they're
true.
letting go, so they're going to really have a hard time winning. They're not really into winning or anything, so they let go of competition. It's really a problem.
Oh well.
Thank you for asking and giving me the opportunity to clarify that, because I'm sure others were.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks and welcome. And so you're down there near Tanisarabiku. Have you ever been out to the Metta Monastery?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
I basically, before COVID, I don't drive, so I was going to the Dharma Bum temple.
Oh yeah, great. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great
And
spot.
I do on Zoom, I do meetings with Pete.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And with
guy.
Greg in Las Vegas.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good buddies.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay, thanks. Have a great night.
Ann. Thank you. You too. I hope to be down there in person soon. So any other questions or thoughts here?
Hi, Kevin.
Hello. Karen.
Karen from Sacramento.
All right.
I just wanted to share with you that I thought tonight's your instruction tonight and your the sit tonight was very helpful for me. I'm relatively new, I think, compared to maybe a lot of people here. I think I've been meditating for about 4 years, longer than that, but regularly for about 4 years, and felt a bit stuck. And I just want to confess that I was.
Oh man, you froze right at the suspenseful point, right when we wanted to learn about the confession. Darn. Oh boy.
Well, I don't think she's coming back, so just a quick comment.
You think she's gone?
I don't know, maybe she'll come back. But I just, a couple weeks ago, I spent a weekend out at Metaforest.
Oh, you did?
With Tanisaro Biko, and he talked a lot about feeling the whole breath through your body, like when you're breathing it in, feeling it coming through like your back and out through your legs. And there was I went through a number of meditations with him, and yeah, he really focused on a whole body kind of feeling. So it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. Is there like a whole monastic community there now, or?
Yeah, that monastery's been there for like 20 years.
Yeah, it's been there a while.
And they have, I think there are about 9 or 10 monks up there and some aspirants, and it's really nice. It's a cool little site. Someone donated an old avocado farm, so it's still
that's right.
They still actively harvest avocados there.
That's right.
When you're a guest, you get to go sleep in the avocado orchard.
Nice. All the avocado toast you can eat.
Well, yeah, kind of, and all
before noon,
and all the coyotes howling all night to keep.
Yeah, I actually met Tanisaro Bhikkhu back when I was in grad school in Irvine, back in 93, 94. Then, and he would just come to visit this one person he knew in Irvine, and we would go to that guy's house and sit with him. Yeah, he's quite a scholar monk, and yeah, he's got a very, very distinct approach to concentration, to meditation, which which I really appreciate. Yeah, it was interesting to see how much Ajahn Pasno referred to him, and as I think I mentioned this the other day when I was talking with Ajahn Pasno, he would occasionally pull the iPhone out of his robe and scroll through some sutras that he had on his iPhone, and a lot of the translations he had were from yeah. I'll say Ajahn Jeff. Yeah. Does he introduce himself? By what name does he introduce himself with?
Everyone calls him Ton Jeff.
Ton Jeff. Yeah, that's how I always knew him. Yeah.
Which is that Brother Jeff?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yeah, and it's interesting that, see, Ajahn Pasno would use Ajahn, which, in the Thai, in the Ajahn Chah kind of tradition, they always say that, but it's a little bit more of Ajahn is a little bit more of a respect, because it's like it comes with 10 years of being a monk that you become an Ajahn. And Tan seems, as far as I know, is more of just a generic identifier like Bhante. And so it seems like sort of an act of humility. That's how I've always sort of interpreted it, that he calls himself Tan Jeff as an act of humility. But, you'd have to ask him. I like to make stuff up. So,
Yeah, he's a very humble guy, very easy to talk to. And if you ever come down, we'll have to go visit.
Yeah. I do want to come down to San Diego next year, do a little LA, San Diego golf, Dharma teaching trip. Yeah. So Karen just came back on here, and so let's see if she's. Karen, did you froze right at the moment when you said you were going to make a confession, and we were all sitting on the edge of our chairs waiting to hear what the confession was, and then you disappeared. So it was kind of like a cliffhanger. I was wondering if you wanted to continue with your confession. And first of all, we're all going to absolve you of your sins, so don't worry about it.
Thank you. Well, and I'm going to leave my camera off. I apologize, but
No worries.
It messes with my bandwidth. So,
right.
My confession is that I was experiencing looking at my body from a place in the back of my head, and you said that, and I knew exactly when you said it. It just resonated for me, and something shifted for me tonight based on your teaching, and that's all I wanted to say was just that. Thank you, because it was very helpful for me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And it's so interesting the way things land. I think we've all had this experience of just you hear something, it's like just the way someone says it, and it might be an idea that you've heard before, but or maybe you just weren't ready to hear it, but for some reason you're like, oh, that. And that's kind of the thing that keeps you coming back, is those moments of delight and insight. And Anne, hi, you got your hand up. I was on the wrong screen. I didn't see it.
I'm on the second screen.
Yeah.
I just had a cool experience with the body breathing today. And I was driving, so I don't recommend it, as a sort of practice necessarily, but I was driving south, and around here we have this beautiful fog that comes through. So I was driving up a really big hill. This is on Highway 1.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of cars, and driving, and the fog, the way the fog rolls in and out, it's really like this breathing. And I was working on my breathing, just driving and breathing.
Nice.
And I just had a connection with the fog, it's the earth breathing, it's this mist, it's this, it's just this one connection.
Yeah.
And also then I thought of, I don't know if you've ever seen, redwood trees, and it's cold in the morning and the warm sunlight hits the redwood tree, and you see them steaming.
Yeah, right.
It's that sort of like, like this whole tree breathing with so with the earth. So,
Nice.
yeah. And when I was doing body scans, when I first learned how to meditate, and we come to the whole body breathing, that was the one instruction that really resonated with me. And, just taking it deeper now is, just really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because you work with qigong, and so it's pretty much the same thing, right? That's whole body breathing, and it's even sort of beyond just body. It's like
It is.
something, your aura breathing or something.
Yeah, it gets pretty trippy.
Yeah,
but it's
but without the drugs.
it's an excellent, yes, non-substance. Yeah. Trip.
Yeah. I was at the bookstore the other day. If anybody needs to go, I recognize it's after 8, so not gonna hold it against you if anybody leaves, but I'm going to talk a little bit because it reminded me. I was in the bookstore, in my neighborhood. They have this independent bookstore, Pegasus, one of my favorite. I'll take a walk and just, use that as my like destination, and then go in there and wander around. And so I went to the body, mind, spirit section, which is not a large section, but it's not a huge bookstore either. And my eye was drawn to this one place where there was a bunch of the same book, because it's not big enough to have like multiple copies of most books. But there was like, oh, there's like 6 of that book. What is that book? Oh, This Is Your Mind on Plants, Michael Pollan's latest, promotion of Let's All Take Psychedelics. And I kind of got pissed off, I have to admit, and I thought, why doesn't somebody write a book like This Is Your Mind on Sobriety, And so I came home and I decided, this is your life on sobriety. And I started writing, pounding out, his things. It didn't go very far. My wife discouraged me from the idea, but I do think like, it just is so interesting that where people look for, value or growth or spiritual experience or something is like, where is it? It's out there somewhere, right? Oh, wow, it's a plant, if I go to Peru and I take this plant, then I'm going to have a spiritual experience. Like, you know what? It's right here. It's right fucking here. You don't need that shit. No, I'm sorry. It just, and the sort of, and obviously as a recovering addict, I'm more aware than most of the risks. It's like, oh no, it's great. It's just, oh, I don't know. I'm sure it's great for some people, but I just think there's something sort of. I mean, it's very typical. We live in an acquisitive culture. Like, I need to get something in order to get. How do I get what I want, that I can feel what I want? And even when it comes to spirituality, if I buy this book, then I'm going to be spiritual. If I go on this retreat, then I'm going to be spiritual. If I do this meditation, then I'm spiritual. If I, take this drug, then I'm going to have a spiritual experience. Like, it's just, all of those things can be tools, but they're not the thing. They are not the thing.
You said it early, and it was music to my ears tonight. You said, came to believe that the breath could restore us to sanity.
Yeah.
And that's that. I don't know why. For me, it hit me really like right in the heart tonight.
Yeah.
Because it is, yeah.
It's a weird thing to say, but it's what the Buddha says.
Yeah. Well, I
mean,
I experienced that.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot that has to be done around that. It's not it's not the ayahuasca breath, you know. It won't like, but yeah, it can be very powerful in this way that Viradamo describes, and in the way that Tanjef describes, you know, of first of all, that process of, you know, recognizing and accepting, and then bringing it into the body, and then seeing the cause and effect, that process, and then the further immersion that Tanjef describes. It really can be very, very powerful. So I got myself a little upset there. I shouldn't do that at the end of the class, but I hope everybody feels good. Anybody who's in, again, some people in the Bay Area, I also mentioned that San Francisco Insight is having a 30th anniversary celebration tomorrow in Golden Gate Park. I'm pretty sure that if you just Google San Francisco Insight, it'll probably be on the front page of their website. I got an email from them, and I'm thinking about stopping over there. I don't know. I rarely go to San Francisco, so and I heard there's a lot of crime there, so you know, I want to avoid that. But oh wait, there's crime in Berkeley too. Never mind. So let's see. Anything to tell you? I told you I finished the audio version of Living Kindness, right? That's coming out December 27th. And thank you. Thank you for the applause, Catherine. So I'll be back here Tuesday morning in the usual fashion, and I will be confessing my sins at that time. I thank you. And so I will say, in my attempt to send you off with something constructive to reflect on, bringing your practice into your body as much as you can, and you know, cultivating the wholesome and abandoning the unwholesome. I encourage you to work with those ideas over these coming days. So thank you all very much. Blessings, peace, love, Dharma.